I will be covering three key aspects which I've been personally involved from last 3 years in my time at Amazon and working with public sector customers across the region. And I think those three aspects are really fundamental with regards to when we talk about shaping the overall cloud security policy and how the governments are adopting cloud, right? So we still see a very mixed adoption pattern across the region, right? So if I take Asia Pacific and I'll just narrow down onto India, we have countries which are way forward and adopting cloud. They're not only running workloads which are unclassified data, but they're also running critical, mission critical services and offering online e-services, e-government services of restricted data or confidential data running on the cloud. And then we have countries which are still evaluating, they don't have a clear cloud first policy. We have certain countries who do have cloud first policy. Philippines is one where we worked very closely with Philippines government writing a cloud first policy for them. And an outcome of that has been that the policy is written, but no one knows on how do you convert that policy and put it into practice. So I think that's of no use if you cannot implement it, right? And we saw a very similar concern raised in the sessions today when there was a question asked saying, "Hey, what do I do with this policy?" Right? It's of no use to me if I don't know how to implement it. So how to take a policy from policy to practice is what I have been focused on working with the governments on how can we convert it into an actionable, implementable policy that you can give to different agencies and tell them this is what you need to do, right? And that's one of the key tasks that I have been involved personally with a lot of governments, so I'll be able to share a broad perspective on that. The other thing that I want to focus on, and I'll give you two examples of what not to do, right? And when we look at countries like US, who probably are a bit more advanced, but at the same time, they've made mistakes as well, right? And we need to look back at them and saying, we are not going to do what you guys are saying. We are not going to do what you guys are doing because it was the wrong thing and now you're fixing it and it's an opportunity for us to how to fix it. So I'll focus a little bit on that. And then coming back to India, so we've seen some good initiatives with cloud adoption. We've seen empanelment process, which is fantastic. There's still some gray areas on data localization, still some concerns around physical isolation. We see that quite a lot comes up in almost every discussion I have with government. So I'll cover a little bit of that. But on the positive side, what I have seen is more from a cybersecurity perspective. I know we have a couple of themes today on cognitive cert and cognitive policing. I will give you an example of what we are doing as a proof of concept with a couple of states in India, where they are building their cert capability and their policing capability with us. Thank you. So I want to start with this trend. I briefly talked about it in the panel discussion when I opened this morning. We continually see this trend. And when I was talking about how some countries are a little bit forward, they already have gone through these emotions. So when we see Australia, when we see Singapore, they already have a cloud first policy. They have a well-defined cloud security policy. It is clearly says what a managed service provider needs to do, what a cloud service provider needs to do. How do we implement it? Now all those are great initiatives, and CSPs are being compliant to them, and it's really raising the bar with regards to cloud adoption. And that's why one of the things that I say in this slide, which probably is one of the most powerful things to say, is that now we see security as the #1 reason for cloud adoption. If you go like 3-4 years back, every CIO or a government CIO or enterprise CIO I used to talk with, they would be so worried about cloud security and would not want to go onto cloud, right? They would come and tell me that, my teams are holding me up for ransom, that if we go onto the cloud, we lose visibility. It's the exact opposite now. And these are the same CIOs now coming and saying, your security in the cloud is much better and we want to move. So I think that's been a great shift, and we need that momentum going on and provide more guidance, more help to our government agencies so they can adopt the technology, and then they have a policy and sound security implementable policies to move forward. So, whenever I talk about security policies, one of the things that is the entire focus of how the policy is driven is this: how do I protect my data? And this is really, really important. And this is where we say that it's all about data, right? I need to protect my data irrespective of the level of classification is, right? That's really important, and that's why we are seeing architectures, which and I'll briefly share one of that with you, is what we call as a data-centric security architecture. How do we build an environment from inside out and implement security controls for data, focusing on the protection of the data at every stage that the data goes through, right? So data security is challenging, but there are ways on how we protect it, right? So it's all about data, right? So if you look at so many things being done with data, right? Data privacy, data security, data integrity, right? It's a massive amount of focus on it. So how do we get started, right? The first step to get started is data classification, right? And I can tell you almost every government I talk to, they say data classification is complex. Agree, data classification is complex. But we are not here to create data classification on how a bank creates a data classification. We are doing a national level data classification, which has to remain at a high level. What is unclassified? The definition of unclassified is publicly accessible information. Data classification, unclassified means any information that a citizen can request from the government under the right to act information. So that's unclassified. And then we move up from there, right? We move into restricted and confidential data, which covers a large amount of data sets, right? Now, this is where the complexity happens. Now, I was in Myanmar a few weeks back, and we were doing a discussion with the government on data classification. And one question asked was on the healthcare data, where was a very good example on what we call as overclassification, right? If you do not give clear guidance to the agencies on how to treat data, personal data, healthcare data, they would go on overclassifying it. So I had someone in the audience who was responsible for the healthcare sector, and he said, the data that I have for my patients is going to be top secret, right? And and you would question that, why do you think this is top secret? His argument was that if I have a patient who is HIV positive, he would not want his details to be leaked, so I'm going to treat that data as top secret. Well, that's his justification. So if we leave that up to agencies without giving them guidance, they will end up doing overclassification. It is still considered as a personal health record. It should still be treated as confidentially as any other data under the health record needs to be treated. Just having a separate case of something being, HIV positive or some other disease doesn't make it top secret, right? The definition of top secret is defined by mechanisms on the impact, the level of damage it can cause to a country. So we don't. So what we end up doing, and that's why I say, the old maxim is true, right? Perfection is the enemy of the good. You will never get perfect with data classification. You just need to provide high-level guidance to the custodians who can classify it at the right level, and then provide guidance from the technology teams who can tell you that how do you secure your data, how do you encrypt it, how do you control who has access to it, how do you control who has access to the keys to the encryption, and how do you introduce automation in order to do that. So that's a really, really critical part. So let me show you an example. This is called overclassification, right? So US government probably has some of the most, high, different types of classification. They have ITAR for the weapons data, defense data, student data, tax data, health data, right? And each one of them has its own compliance program. And if you look at ITAR, which is for the weapons data, and if you look at HIPAA, which is for the healthcare data, and when you boil them down to actual security controls that are implemented in a network, they are the same, right? I need to protect my data, I have to encrypt it. Well, yes, you need to encrypt it in ITA, you need to encrypt it in HIPAA, you need to encrypt student data, financial data. How does that define? So what it does is creating these kind of layers introduces complexity, and complexity drives cost. And we know that every time there is a compliance burden put on an organization, we see cost increased, skills shortage is already there. We heard from so many, I think we see that industry wide, it's not just India, we see across the globe. So this is an example of what we need to learn or not, what not to do, right? On the other hand, we have UK. This is something that they came up with, and this was very specifically done for cloud adoption. So they simplified it to 3 different levels: official, secret, and top secret, and made it easier for the agencies, saying, if you follow these 3 steps, you would know what can go on the cloud. So anything that is official can go on the cloud, which includes all your SPI, PII, PHI, financial data, everything that we deal in our day-to-days, right? That's the information that flows and will always flow. I usually give an example to the audiences and say, no matter how much data localization you can apply, right? I don't know how many people travel overseas. And the first thing when you travel overseas is you take your passport, you take your credit card, you hand it over to the hotel, you check in, and you have given 2 very critical pieces of your information, and now they're offshore. There are millions of us traveling overseas. So data is already there, right? You cannot control this data. What is more important is that how do I ensure no matter where this data goes, I have security attached to it, right? That is the key thing. The more powerful thing to this classification is this. So there was a study done which essentially said, let's find out how much of that data is secret and top secret, right? And when we look at the numbers, it's staggering, right? All of that data localization that we talk about for secret and top secret data is just 10% of the data. And we are driving national policies to do data localization based on that. Now, that is the data that should not leave offshore. And I can guarantee you it will be a handful of people that you can count probably on your one hand who would have access to that data, right? That 10% of data would be very, very well kept secret and would not leave offshore, right? It will definitely be sitting in country. Now this really makes us think that when we look at a national level cybersecurity, cloud security strategy, on how do we use the data classification to drive that strategy. So let's look at some of the problems, right? And we saw this confusion. We had 2 people asking same questions today, and they interchangeably used data localization with data security. There is absolutely no correlation between them. Yeah. If anyone says that my data sits in one country and it's secure, well, there is no guarantee. You still need to put security controls around it. So always focus on securing the data, not where it is located. The location of the data has got everything to do with the legislation and the control, not with the security, right? And I am not saying that data localization is not required in a policy. It definitely has its place, but you need to ensure that how you apply classification to decide what goes on the cloud versus what does not. A quick view of different countries in the region who are now limiting the data localization requirements. So if you look at majority of the countries are now removing the data localization out of their cloud first policies. Now this is a clear indication of realizing that data security is more important, not data localization that is important. So, just something I wanted to share. This is something else that for most of the government cloud strategies based on data classification, we usually share. One of the things that will always be there is that when we talk about a cloud story with the government, there will never be a government who says, I'm going all into the cloud. No, it's not going to happen. There will always be a hybrid cloud. We'll always see the data that is secret, top secret, that will stay within a government data center, and anything that is unclassified, restricted, confidential, with the appropriate security controls can move on to the cloud. So data classification really drives your overall strategy on how you select what goes onto the cloud and how do you secure that as well. So the challenge with data security and I talked about it earlier. I said, there's the data security centric architecture. The challenge with data security is that the moment you create a document that is confidential or secret in nature, the security has to attach with it. And then when the data goes throughout its life cycle, when the data is created, it's stored, it's shared, it's analyzed, it's archived, it's deleted, right? The entire life cycle, we have to make sure that the security stays with it. Now, if we keep that in mind and build our architectures in securing the data throughout the life cycle, that's when we are talking about a good security policy that is addressing what needs to be looked at. This is what Amazon does internally, right? We have a lot of automation built internally where we keep humans away from data. And why we do that? Now, you cannot keep humans completely away from data, but there is a majority of work that is done which lets people come close to the data is where you can restrict it. If I have a database administrator who needs to run a query on data, I don't need to give him access to the full data. Queries can be run on dummy data sets. Optimization can be done on dummy data sets. We can automate system to system communications. If we limit the people who have access to the data, we have more control, we have more visibility, we can take actions much better. And one of the things and one of the overall strategies that we recommend our customers is to implement automation across wherever data and sensitive data is involved. If people don't need to see it, well, principle of least privilege needs to apply. So that's something really, really fundamental when it comes to data security. So I'm going to shift gears from it, and I said, I'll cover one of the things that we are seeing in country, some of the work that we are involved with a couple of states. We are building proof of concepts for them, and this is where we are bringing the Amazon artificial intelligence together with cybersecurity, which is really, really game changing. And I understand that there are plans to build a national cybersecurity center as well. So what we have seen is the emergence of this, right? And I'll give you a little bit of background on why we are seeing an emergence of a national integrated command and control and what it really means. Now, we are seeing a rise in cybercrime, right? No, nothing new over there. We all know that, right? We have identity theft, we have cyber extortion. We were talking about cyber awareness this morning. We give young kids phones in their hands, and we have massive amount of cases on cyberbullying. We have senior citizens who are robbed of money using social engineering. There's a huge problem, right? And now we are seeing emergence of a lot of cyber cells. So the police is now getting into a domain which was unknown to them. And most of these initiatives that we are involved with we have been initiated by the cyber cell of different police departments in the states. Now they're looking at it and saying, hey, you know what? A, we are not trained. B, we have no visibility. We get a complaint, we don't know what to do. And then they would rely on the certs, and certs have gone through a bit of a change in what a cert typically was. So, if you look at a traditional cert, which was, more like a advisory body, is now getting more proactive, is now acting on things, and the role is expanding, which is fantastic. But we still need to give and build this integrated command and control where, and the POCs, and I'll share what we are doing with the POCs, is we are building a system which can let general public lodge a complaint. And again, the legal framework needs to catch up. We don't have a legal framework which basically captures every type of cyber incident, but we've seen additions to the special acts and the IT Act and different acts that have been put in place in India covering the cyber crimes. But when we get that legal framework in place, we still need a large amount of police to be trained, right? So the police are not becoming cybersecurity analysts. They need to do forensics. One of the common things that I heard from talking to the different state police departments was that we see all of these videos circling around. We don't know what is the origin of it. And this is where we are coming in, giving them access to artificial intelligence and services that they can leverage. How can this integrated command and control talk to the banks and the financial institutes, to the regulators, to the certs, and gain visibility and take action, which is really, really important. So that's why we're seeing this emergence of this, and we want to see more and more of this. So let's look at some of the key components that we are building for them. Cognitive cert, right? It was one of the themes. One of the things that we are building is threat detection using artificial intelligence. So if I was to ask how many different type of cybersecurity incidents someone will say 10, 5, 15, 20. But we know this field is evolving. Every day we see some new kind of attack that comes up. So how do we up our game? How do we ensure that we can recognize advanced threats without having to know the visibility, right? Prediction is what we are talking about. So this is where we are building threat detection, which can look at patterns and identify indicators of attack. So no longer we are interested in knowing indicators of compromise, right? A compromise has happened. Yes, there is a botnet network. Yes, there is traffic going out. Yes, there is data going out. Thing has already gone bad. I need to catch things a step before. So I need to identify what are the indicators of attack. And this is essentially one of the key pieces that can help. We are using Amazon Recognition, which is facial recognition technology. And this has a wide variety of uses. Not only it helps doing facial recognition, so we have different customers across the world who are using it in different capacities. We have police departments who have placed cameras and CCTVs at critical points, and they are catching a person of interest. I had a discussion with one of the states and in India, and they said there is a lot of burden on the courts. There's a massive burden on the courts because these people who are missing, they essentially are living somewhere close by. There's no way for us to catch them. And technologies like these can not only do a facial recognition, it can also trigger the location of where the picture was taken and can send the details to the closest cyber cell so they can go and apprehend the person. There is advanced analytics available. You can do analysis of the location. If you have like a MMS doing the rounds, which is objectionable content, we can recognize and extract rich metadata out of that message and can do forensics on the fly. What is the location? We have location information on the images captured. What is the location of that image? We can identify who is in that image, what ages they are, right? What is the location which this could have possibly been shot at? And then we can work through the integrated command and control center with the telecom organizations and try to find and narrow down the information on, I know the location, I know the timing, I know the surrounding, can you tell me who was there, right? So those kind of technologies really helping law and enforcement to build these integrated centers. I already covered that, so I can skip this. This is another key one, right? Whether we are fighting fake news, whether we want to control riots, whether we want to just do an analysis of the sentiments. So many times it happens, a fake news is doing the rounds, and we need someone to take action. We probably need a government body to send out an advisory saying we are seeing that pattern. So we can take intel coming out of Twitter, Facebook, all social media, and we can do a sentiment analysis and provide intelligence to the police so they can take appropriate action, whether it's fake news, whether it is something doing the rounds, whether it is a riot that's going to be happening, right? You're expecting 100 people and all of a sudden, the hashtag is going crazy and we see, no, it's going to be 1,000. Proper policing can be done. Very, very critical in doing intelligence gathering. The last one, which is really important, right? This is something, I think this will be groundbreaking for a lot of the police. So we are seeing a digitization of FIRs. We are seeing criminal data records, which actually are structured data and they're highly connected data. So the good thing is that we can use tools like graph database, where we can connect the dots, where we can say, all right, this city, this time of the year, this time of the day, we see car thefts. Right? I'm now going to put policing in place for the next year so that we are covered. We are seeing a pattern with a certain criminal. We know what he or she has done in the past and we can see and connect the dots. So criminal database analytics helps policing better, helps them identify and join the dots much better and look at historical records and get really better in providing safe and secure services to the citizens. So this is where we are seeing, and the good thing that I want to talk about is, and bringing it together to how it ties down to the cloud, is we're running all of this for the states in running the cloud. There is no third-party software. It's running purely using native services that the AWS cloud has to offer, whether it's a graph database, whether it is AI, whether it's threat detection using machine learning and advanced analytics, or the facial recognition. So you are not relying on a third-party software. You have full control on the technology, and you're building the solutions which are meaningful and relevant to you. So with that, coming to a close, we need to embrace technology. We need to have the controls in place. We often talk about, and I read in news, I think a few months back, and I think that was shared through to me, that RBI is planning to ban crypto, and there'll be a 10-year sentence to anyone who's dealing with crypto. I think that's the wrong approach. What we really need to look at is we need to embrace the technology. We need to embrace it and say, you know what? Every time we block something, there are 10 different bad ways and bad actors who will find ways to do something. And I don't want to spend time catching them. What I want to do is put a proper framework. I want to put regulation around it and manage it properly. Right? That's really important. And same goes for AI. Same goes for cloud. It's the same story on how we enable ourselves and prepare ourselves for the future rather than blocking it. So coming to a close, I've slightly changed the context of this slide, right? And I keep telling most of my public sector customers when it comes to this slide, and say, you right now in your data center are managing the entire security yourself. Let us share the security with you. Now it's the cloud provider who's sharing all of the underlying infrastructure security, and you only have to focus on the security on the top, which is really, really powerful, which takes the complexity out of your project, which takes the cost out of your projects. It helps you accelerate faster and offer services to your citizens much, much faster. And that's how we need to be looking at when we are shaping the new cloud security strategy, that making things easier, making things faster, and not doing trade-offs, right? We need to move fast and we need to be secure. There is no or in that. So with that, thank you very much.
As far as AWS is concerned, that's you taking care of all these things. So because I think in this forum we are looking cyber security strategy for India, right? And cloud strategy. So how you can see like how to check and how to make the baseline for them in terms of cloud.
We look at the procurement vehicle in country which needs to evaluate based on criteria, which is not just saying I want a virtual machine, but you need to understand that when I get that virtual machine, what kind of security do I get with it, right? So I'll give you an AWS example. So we have 50 plus certifications and numerous other security programs that we run for every region and every facility that we have across the world. So what that gives to our customers is that you inherit more than 2,200 security controls at no cost. So the moment you put your first virtual machine on AWS, you automatically have those 2,200 security controls that you did not have to do anything on. So I think when we are comparing apples for apples, I think the procurement vehicle really needs to look at those things carefully and saying, I'm not just comparing a virtual machine, I'm comparing the entire spectrum of infra, the security, the compliance, the features, the breadth and the depth that I get with it. Our CEO says this, don't let your friends build data centers for you, right? We don't let friends build data center for friends. And the reason for that is that if you look at governments, the government's core business is not to build data centers, right? And we have seen this pattern, and the reason I was giving a little bit context to start with on how we are seeing different countries at different levels is because we now have countries who have gone through that whole emotion and they're saying, you know what, I don't need to build my data center. And when I build my data center, I have got vendor management issues, I've got capacity issues, at a given point, and then I have to secure it. And then I have, if anyone has been, as you mentioned, you've done the SAP HANA, and you would know that if you have to do one compliance program, just ISO, it can take you up to a year to do just one ISO. So we run not just one ISO, we run 50 of those across hundreds of facilities across. So you leave the things with people who are best doing that. I think that's really critical, and then focus on building on top of it. How do I leverage what's already there, right? And I think our questioning is, I won't say it should not be questioned. It should be questioned, but I think it's a journey. There's a lot of strong perception around cloud, and I've seen questions being asked on as we have in India, right, with the GCC, with the government community cloud. They seem to be hung up on physical isolation.